Much of the history of black folks is intimate, disjointed, and full of questions. Where did this come from, and how did we get here? This is a quote by Rachel Gonza, and this quote still provides questions that still lie in the hearts of slavery, discussions of slavery today. Good morning, my name is Iswan Wanunu. Today I'll be talking about the misconceptions and misunderstandings of slavery in modern society. My research question is, to what extent does the underrepresented and rarely examined aspects of slavery negatively affect historical discourse and public understanding of slavery? The lack of a complete, comprehensive understanding of slavery in its full scope leads there to be misconceptions about it in modern society. The three main culprits for these misconceptions are the over-focus on slavery in America, the oversimplification of slavery in educational systems, and the minimization of black abolitionists' roles and contributions to abolition. First is the dominance of U.S. slavery. Most of the time when slavery is being discussed, the first thought that jumps to people's minds is the enslavement of African Americans in the early U.S. history. That is the most emphasized part. Even though that is true, this leads people to forget about slave systems and slave trades in other various regions of the world. As you can see in this graph, there are more than 8 million slaves going to other regions like Brazil, Jamaica, St. Dominica. Only a small amount go to the United States. However, not many people talk about these other slave systems. The marginalization of other slave systems. The transatlantic slave trade is the most emphasized slave trade of human history. That being said, this leads people to forget about other slave trades such as those in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. Even though slavery in these societies were vital in the contribution to the evolution of these societies and regions, they tend to be glossed over. For example, in Africa, slavery existed long before European colonization, with local kingdoms participating in both local and international slave trades. Similarly, in Asia and the Middle East, during the Indian Ocean slave trade, millions of slaves were transported. As you can see in this graph, regions like Portugal, UK, and France had much more of a role in slavery than the US. That being said, they're still not talked about in mainstream historical discussions. The lack of a comprehensive education on slavery. Slavery in schools is often used as a literary device or abstract concept to teach about in literary texts, such as texts like Uncle Tom's Cabin. Even though these texts can be beneficial, they often do not provide a deep understanding of the real life consequences that slavery has had on us today. Focusing primarily on slavery in these literary texts causes us to miss out on opportunities to discuss its full historical and global context, and to understand how it shapes societies, economies, and nations. Even in educational settings, there still tends to be an overfocus on U.S. slavery. On top of that, the brutalities of slavery in educational systems are not taught to their full extent. We hear about the normal things, such as the existence of plantations and things of that nature, but we are not fully taught about the dehumanization, the extreme violence, and the systematic oppression that slaves went through during that time. Because of this, the suffering that slaves went through during that time period are often undermined, and the horrific legacy of slavery is not fully explored. As you can see in this graph, the evolution of the racial education gap has been decreasing over the years, from 1940 to 2000. These failures in the educational system cause students to develop many misconceptions that they take with them into adulthood and also into society. According to Matthew Mengler, a student at a South Carolina elementary school reported that slavery wasn't that bad. This could be an effect of the full brutalities of slavery not being taught. Another misconception that a student had, according to the same source, was that students perceive slaves as often only Black or African American. This could be a direct result of the global context of slavery not being fully explored. The last misconception was that students in a class were surprised in a movie when African Americans were denied voting rights based on arbitrary criteria. Black abolitionist contributions. Some people believe that black people during that time were simply passive recipients of freedom, but this is not true, as they fought for their freedom and demanded justice. Prominent figures and voices such as Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and Sojourner Truth were warriors for change, demanding freedom for themselves and others. On top of that, according to Colin Powell, black soldiers were an integral contribution to the North's victory. Thousands of black soldiers during that time enlisted to fight for the North. Even though they faced racism, even fighting for their own sides, they understood that the future of their people depended on them. Underrepresentation of black abolitionist contributions. Historical narratives often focus on white abolitionists, causing bravery and leadership of black abolitionists to be overlooked. Similarly, black abolitionist roles in abolition in other regions other than the US, such as Cuba and Brazil, remain underrecognized despite their vital contributions to the development of these countries. This erases the true global scope of the abolitional movement and the leadership of black individuals in shaping it. Solutions include expanding the educational curriculum to include more diverse slave systems, slave trades, and abolitional leaders. By doing this, we can highlight a more full context on the true aspects of slavery. However, some limitations include persistence from policymakers due to ideological or political beliefs. Curriculum overload. Students already have to learn a lot in schools, and adding a lot more information about slavery can cause an overload on students and teachers. Lastly, political polarization. Slavery is a very sensitive topic, and that causes people to fight about how it should be presented and taught. This could lead to delays in educational changes. Thank you.
All right, 2 questions for you. First up, how valid and reliable were the sources that you used, and then how do you know they were?
My sources were valid and reliable because I got them from peer-reviewed academic journals, and I also checked their source list to ensure that those were also valid and credible.
And what additional questions kind of popped up as you were working your way through the whole project?
Additional questions that popped up was I wanted to research more about the effects that slavery had in other regions and their developments specifically. So just more specific examples about slavery in those other developments.